At 4:15 in the morning, the first bulldozer turned onto Harrow Road with its lights off. By sunrise, Bracken County intended to bury the old sheep pond beneath 6 feet of gravel and clay. The order had been signed quietly. The retired librarian who owned it had less than 2 hours to remove anything she wished to keep. Elsie Harrow was already waiting. She stood at the mud's edge in rubber boots and her late husband's canvas coat, holding a dented tin box. Behind her, 58 brass tags lay in careful rows beside the stone ledge the county had ordered removed. 3 days earlier, people had laughed when Elsie paid $34 for the pond at a tax auction. Her cousin called it a useless hole. The road director called it a delay. A collector called the tags antique trade tokens and offered her more money than she had seen in years. But the tags were not antiques. They carried family codes matching sheep workers who had supposedly abandoned their land during the winter of 1931. Inside Elsie's box were paid debt slips, unsigned deeds, and a ledger page bearing her grandfather's initials. Those papers might stop the bulldozers. They might also cost Elsie her pasture, her home, and the last honorable memory she had of the man who raised her. The county had come before sunrise because daylight would bring witnesses. What they did not know was that Elsie had spent 40 years teaching people where forgotten records were kept. The question was whether she could bear what those records revealed about her own family. Stay with Elsie Harrow for this story. Some land is called worthless only because the truth beneath it has been ignored. And sometimes, the woman everyone dismisses is the only person who knows where forgotten records were hidden and which family names those records were meant to protect. 3 days before the bulldozers came, the second-floor hearing room of the Bracken County Courthouse smelled of wet wool, floor wax, and burnt coffee. The old sheepwash pond appeared near the end of the tax auction list. Parcel 19C, 12 acres. Seasonal water. No approved building access. Pending transportation easement. The auctioneer looked over his glasses. Opening bid, $34. No hand moved. Someone asked whether the county would pay to have it taken away. A few people laughed. Elsie Harrow sat in the third row with her purse beneath both hands. She wore the brown coat she had used for 20 winters at the county. In one pocket were 3 unpaid pharmacy notices and her grandfather's cracked silver watch. The auctioneer started to close the parcel. Elsie raised her hand. 34. The room turned toward her. Then Wade Harrow covered his face. Wade was Elsie's cousin, 11 years younger, and still dressed like the farm equipment dealer he had been before his business failed. "Elsie," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's your medicine money." The laughter grew. The auctioneer tapped the gavel. Sold. Caleb Voss, the county's transportation director, stood beside a rolled map near the wall. He approached while Elsie signed the receipt. "Mrs. Harrow, you understand the county already holds an easement across most of that parcel. I read the notice. The bypass grade runs directly over the pond. Clearing begins Monday." Wade stood. "Then stop this. She doesn't understand what she bought." Elsie kept writing. Her hand remained steady. Caleb unrolled the survey. A red line crossed the narrow oval marked Old Wash Pond. "The land has no agricultural value," he said. "We'll drain it, remove the stone, compact the ground, and compensate you." Elsie set down the pen. "What stone?" "The old washing ledge. Is it shown on the original survey?" Caleb glanced at the engineer beside him. "The current survey doesn't distinguish individual stones." "When will you move it?" "During site preparation." "Monday?" "Possibly earlier." Wade came closer. "You spent $34 to delay a road for a rock." Elsie folded the receipt and placed it inside her purse. "No." "Then what?" "I bought 3 days." The answer erased Wade's smile, but only for a moment. By afternoon, half the town had heard. At the feed store, 2 men asked whether she planned to stock the pond with trout. At the pharmacy, the clerk slid 1 prescription back because her insurance payment had not cleared. Someone left a rubber duck on her car. Elsie said nothing. She drove north of town and opened a rusted gate she had not touched in years. The pond lay beyond dead thistle and shoulder-high cattails. The washing ledge ran along its eastern bank, a flat shelf of sandstone marked by shallow grooves. Water the color of old tea rested against it. Elsie remembered standing there at 9 years old while her grandfather held a lantern above the water. Silas Harrow had been exacting and silent. He counted fence staples after repairs and measured flour twice before tying a sack. But that night, his hand had trembled. Never let them move the ledge, he had told her. She had asked what lay beneath it. Debts, he said. The kind that learned to wait. For 58 years, Elsie had believed he meant money. Now, she cut cattails away from the stone. Mud pulled at her boots. Near the center, beneath a layer of moss, she found 3 straight scratches. They were too even to have been made by weather. Rain began before sunset. Elsie remained until water covered the toes of her boots and the cold reached through her socks. Then she drove home with Silas's watch ticking faintly in her pocket. At dawn, she returned. The pond had risen nearly 2 feet. Brown water pressed against the ledge, carrying twigs and broken reeds. Something shone beside the stone. Elsie stepped into the mud and lifted an oval brass tag, blackened at the edges. It carried no price and no company name. Only 2 characters had been cut into the metal. Hikmuibai. She wiped it against her coat. She had seen that code before, not in her grandfather's store. In a ledger beneath the county library, on a shelf no one had opened in almost 40 years. Elsie closed her hand around the tag. Then she went to find the record she had spent most of her life avoiding. Elsie found the basement key inside the chipped blue mug behind the circulation desk. The Bracken County Library had been closed for 6 months while the county debated whether to repair the roof or sell the building. Dust lay over the return slot. A plastic sheet covered the children's room, and the air smelled of paper, plaster, and old rain. She unlocked the basement door and descended 12 narrow steps. For 40 years, Elsie had kept those shelves in order. Tax rolls on the west wall, farm ledgers in gray boxes, railroad notices in red binders, church records beneath the furnace pipes where heat kept mold from settling into the paper. She had built her life around the belief that records could outlast excuses, but there was one row she had almost never touched. Harrow Mercantile, 1,927, 1,938. She stood before it with the brass tag in her palm. Hutmuibai. The same code was stamped on box 4. Elsie did not open it immediately. She sat at the long table and placed Silas's cracked watch beside the tag. It had not kept proper time since the winter he died, but she still wound it every Sunday. Some habits were less about usefulness than obedience. Silas Harrow had raised her after a truck accident took both her parents on a sleet-covered road outside Red Butte. Elsie had been 7. For the next 11 years, she lived above his store in 2 rooms that smelled of flour, dust, lamp oil, and cedar soap. He was not an easy man to love. He measured her bathwater with his hand and rationed coal by the shovel. He expected boots wiped clean, accounts copied without blots, and every promise remembered exactly. He rarely praised her, yet every winter morning, before she woke, he warmed her shoes beside the stove. He never told her he loved her. He repaired what cold could reach. The tin box had belonged to him. Elsie remembered it beneath the mercantile counter, always locked. Receipts went into the register. Deeds went to the courthouse. But that box never left his sight, and Silas never cleaned the dried mud from its hinges. One October night, when Elsie was 9, he took her to the sheep pond after supper. He carried a lantern and the tin box. The moon was thin. The washing ledge shone pale above the water, and cattails whispered in the wind. Silas knelt beside the flat stone. "Remember where this sits," he said. Elsie thought he was teaching her a boundary line. Instead, he pressed his palm against the ledge and made her do the same. "Never let them move it." "Who?" "Anyone. What's under it?" Silas looked toward the dark pasture. "Debts," he said, "the kind that learn to wait." At 9, Elsie imagined coins. Perhaps stolen wages. Perhaps money he meant to return when it was safe. She spent years believing there had been goodness in his secrecy. That belief followed her into the library. She became a librarian because she trusted order. Names belonged in indexes. Land belonged on maps. A debt paid should be marked paid. A person should not disappear because someone stronger found it convenient. But order was easier when it belonged to strangers. 22 years earlier, a woman named Teresa Ortiz came into the library carrying a grocery sack full of letters. She was 78 and walked with a cane polished smooth at the handle. She told Elsie her father had been born on 42 acres north of the old sheep road. County maps said the family had surrendered the land in 1931. "My father said they paid," Teresa told her. "He said Harrow's store kept the deed." Elsie remembered the room going still. She also remembered recognizing Silas's handwriting on one letter. Teresa asked Elsie to check the mercantile ledgers. Elsie told her the basement was being treated for mold. That was true. It was also not the reason. For 3 weeks, Teresa returned every Thursday. Each time, Elsie found another excuse. The catalog was incomplete. The deed books had been moved. The county clerk would know more. Then Teresa stopped coming. 6 months later, her obituary appeared in the local paper. Elsie clipped it and placed it inside a dictionary at the reference desk. Perhaps she wanted punishment close enough to touch. Now, in the silent basement, she pulled box 4 from the shelf. The lid lifted with a dry scrape. Inside were payroll sheets, store credits, and account cards tied in bundles. Many names had been crossed out. Others had been replaced by codes. Humwe Hukmwe Hunwe. Elsie searched until her fingers began to shake. H17 appeared beside the name Ortiz, Mateo, and Elena. The account showed flour, kerosene, winter feed, doctor's powder, and work boots. Below the charges were payments recorded in wool weight, labor days, and company scrip. The final balance was 0, paid in full. Elsie read it twice. Then she turned the page. The next sheet had been cut out with a blade. Only a narrow strip remained near the binding. On it, in Silas's handwriting, were 3 words, transferred by agreement. The phrase was wrong. She knew it before she found the tax record. Families did not surrender 42 acres after paying every debt unless something else had been taken first. A sound came from upstairs. The front door opened, then shut. Someone crossed the main floor. Elsie slipped the H17 account card beneath her coat and closed the box. Elsie? It was Wade. He stopped halfway down the stairs. "I saw your truck," he said. "Caleb says you're digging through county records now. I'm looking for one name. You bought mud. Don't turn it into a family scandal." Elsie looked at Silas's watch on the table. For most of her life, she had believed the old man's silence meant he had protected someone. Now she wondered whether he had only protected himself, and whether she had spent 40 years doing the same. By noon, the rain had thinned to a gray mist over Harrow Road. Elsie returned to the pond with a shovel, a milk crate, and the small electric pump her husband had once used to drain their cellar. Wade followed her from town but stopped at the gate. He watched from behind the windshield, then drove away without speaking. The pond looked different now that Elsie knew one name connected to it. Not Mateo Ortiz. Not Elena. Hukmwe. The code made the mud feel less empty. Long before the bypass survey, the hollow had served as a sheep washing station for ranches across the northern valley. Drovers pushed animals down a narrow chute toward the stone ledge, where workers lowered them into water mixed with soap, ash, and lime. The washing loosened burrs, grease, and parasites before shearing season. The county histories described the place in one sentence: old commercial wash pond, abandoned after rail consolidation. Elsie had repeated that line to schoolchildren for years. Now she noticed everything it left out. The ledge was too wide for one worker. Iron sockets had once held rails along both sides. 3 shallow channels ran beneath the stone, directing water toward separate parts of the pond. On the eastern edge, the grooves were worn smooth by thousands of hands. The people who worked there had not been passing through. They had stood in the same place day after day. Elsie set the pump intake near the ledge and ran an extension cord to her truck. The motor coughed, rattled, then began pulling brown water through the hose. Within 10 minutes, wool fibers clogged the screen. The strands were dark, compacted, and held together by black mud. Elsie cleaned the filter with a pocket knife, restarted the pump, and watched the water fall another few inches. A brass glint appeared near the 3rd drainage channel. Then another. She climbed down and worked the mud loose with her fingers. The first tag was round, unlike H17. Its edge had 2 square notches and 1 curved cut. The face read K3. The next was oval, M21. The third was a narrow rectangle with a hole punched through one end. No 2 shapes were exactly alike. Elsie carried them to the ledge and arranged them beside H17. They had no monetary values, company seal, or words such as paid, feed, or wool. Only letters, numbers, and cuts along the edge. They were not designed like coins. They were designed to be recognized by touch. Many workers in the old payroll records had been recent immigrants. Some spoke Spanish or Basque. Others had arrived from Croatia, Poland, or northern Italy. A worker who could not read English could still identify a tag by its shape, hole position, or rim pattern. The tags might have been account markers, or proof that a person had completed a job. Elsie searched until the pump clogged again. This time, the motor whined, spat muddy water, and died. She sat on the ledge with her gloves in her lap. The county had made the pond sound shallow and simple. It was neither. The stone extended farther beneath the bank than the survey showed, and each channel disappeared under it. When Elsie pushed her shovel below the central groove, the blade struck something hollow. A thin line ran beneath the ledge, too straight to be a natural crack. Someone had fitted the slab over a narrow cavity. Elsie began clearing the seam, but roots had grown through it. She had exposed less than 2 feet when a voice came from behind her. "Those are older than I expected." A man in a clean felt hat stood beside the milk crate. Elsie recognized Daniel Pike from estate sales and county fairs. He bought farm signs, railroad locks, store tokens, ration books, and anything else he could label rare before selling it in Denver. He did not look at the pond. He looked only at the brass. "You came through the gate without asking," Elsie said. "It was open. It was chained." Daniel smiled and picked up K3. He rubbed its edge with his thumb. "Early livestock tokens," he said. "Possibly private issue." "From whose livestock company?" "Hard to say. You said they were older than you expected. Patina tells you something. So does recognition." His smile weakened. Elsie watched his eyes move across the codes. He paused at M21, then glanced toward the ledge. He had seen the system before. Daniel removed a checkbook from his coat. "I'll save you the trouble of cleaning them. $8,000 for everything you found." Elsie laughed once. "You came here thinking they were scrap." "I came because Bracken County has very little left from its early wool trade." "Then why 8,000? Collectors pay for sets." "This isn't a set. It may become one." Elsie looked at the dead pump, the prescription notices in her purse, and the mud drying on her hands. $8,000 would cover every unpaid medical bill and replace the furnace before winter. Daniel tore out a check. "No one else has to know what they are." Elsie did not take it. "What are they?" "Old brass." "That isn't what you thought when you saw M21. For the first time, Daniel's face went still. A truck sounded on the road. Caleb Voss had arrived with 2 surveyors and a roll of orange steaks. Daniel folded the check and placed it on the ledge. "The county will call them debris," he said. "By tomorrow, they may be under 6 feet of fill." He walked back toward his car. Elsie picked up the check. For one dangerous second, she imagined signing it. Then she turned it over. On the back, Daniel had written a condition in small blue letters. All associated records, marks, and recovery rights included. He was not buying brass. He was buying whatever the tags could lead to. Elsie spent the afternoon at the long table in the library basement, arranging the brass tags in 4 rows. Eich, tubulus K, Nol Tree, M27. The letters looked simple until she tried matching them to the payroll books. Then the system broke apart. Some workers appeared under surnames. Others were listed only by first names, nicknames, or country of origin. Mateo Ortiz became Matt Ortez in another ledger. 2 women shared the name Elena. Several accounts had been rewritten in a different hand, and entire weeks were missing. Elsie built a chart on brown wrapping paper. Letter, number, shape, edge pattern, account name, land parcel. By dusk, only H17 matched with certainty. The other tags led in 3 directions at once. For the first time since buying the pond, Elsie wondered whether Daniel Pike had been right. Perhaps they were only work markers. Perhaps the missing pages had nothing to do with the land. Perhaps she had turned one guilty memory into a history that was not there. Wade found her asleep over the chart. He set down a paper cup of coffee, then read enough of her notes to understand. "You have 1 name," he said when she woke. One paid account, and no deed. The deed should have been returned. Should have been isn't proof. Elsie folded the chart. Neither is saying those families left willingly. Wade looked toward the Harrow boxes. "The road meeting starts in 20 minutes. Caleb is announcing the grading schedule. Come with me. Take the county's offer before this becomes something you can't put back." The courthouse room was fuller than it had been at the auction. Contractors stood along the walls. Store owners filled the front rows. The bypass promised truck traffic, construction wages, and a shorter route to the interstate. To most of the room, the sheep pond was not a mystery. It was an obstruction. Caleb Voss projected the road map. "Clearing begins Monday morning," he said. Drainage work on parcel 19. C will be completed first. Elsie raised her hand. The stone ledge has a man-made cavity beneath it. A contractor asked whether the cavity was large enough to hide her $34. Laughter moved through the room. Caleb did not join it. Mrs. Harrow, the survey team found no registered structure. They didn't lift the stone. We are not required to excavate every farm feature on an abandoned site. I found coded tags there. Daniel Pike stood near the side door. Early market tokens, he said. Interesting, but not unusual. Elsie turned toward him. Then why did you offer $8,000? The room quieted. Daniel smiled as though she had misunderstood him. Collectors pay premiums for complete local sets. You asked for all associated records and recovery rights. Caleb looked at Daniel. Wade closed his eyes. Daniel stepped into the aisle. Fine, $20,000, publicly offered. Enough to remove any claim that the county is destroying items of value. Several people murmured approval. $20,000 would pay the pharmacy, repair Elsie's furnace, and cover her property taxes. Wade leaned close. Take it. Elsie looked at Daniel. Why are the edges cut differently? Manufacturing variation. They were filed by hand. Then workers marked them for convenience. Which workers? Daniel glanced toward Caleb. This meeting is about a road. Elsie understood that he was not afraid of the brass. He was afraid she would discover who had held it. She declined the offer. The room did not laugh this time. It sighed. The sound was worse. By late afternoon, orange survey stakes stood along both banks of the pond. Elsie returned with a pry bar and tried to clear the seam beneath the washing ledge. Mud softened around the eastern channel. Each shovel of earth filled with brown water again. She worked until her shoulders trembled. The ledge did not move. Then the bank above it gave way. Mud, reeds, and broken stone slid into the hollow. Elsie fell backward and lost one boot. The pry bar vanished beneath the water. For several seconds, she stared at the cracked ledge. She had failed to open it. Worse, she might have destroyed whatever Silas meant her to protect. A strip of dark fabric protruded from the collapsed bank. Elsie pulled it free. Oilcloth had been folded around 3 narrow slips of paper. The ink had blurred at the edges, but the center lines remained legible. Received in full. The first named, Mateo Ortiz. The second named Petar Kovac. The third named Rosa Marin. Each carried a date, a debt total, and the same initials at the bottom. S. H. Silas Harrow. There were no deeds, only proof that 3 families had paid. For years, Elsie had treated those initials as a guarantee of order. Now they sat beneath 3 completed debts, while the corresponding land records claimed surrender. The same handwriting that had taught her to balance accounts might also have helped erase the people who paid them. A vehicle stopped at the gate. Lena Ortiz stepped out carrying a grocery sack of old letters. She looked at the wet papers, then at the H-17 tag resting on the ledge. My grandmother came to your library for that name, Lena said. Elsie rose slowly from the mud. I know. Lena's expression hardened. Then this time, don't send us somewhere else. She placed the sack between them. Inside was the letter that would reveal what happened after the debt was paid. Lena Ortiz did not enter Elsie's house. She stood beneath the porch light with rain dripping from her coat and held the grocery sack against her chest. My grandmother carried these into your library, she said. You told her the records were unavailable. Elsie did not defend herself. I was afraid of what I would find. Lena looked past her toward the dark pasture. That fear cost her 22 years. The words landed without anger. That made them harder to bear. Elsie carried the 3 paid slips from the pond and placed them on the porch rail. Lena unfolded a letter from the sack. The paper had been repaired with clear tape, and the creases had nearly split through the ink. It had been written in 1932 by Mateo Ortiz to his brother in New Mexico. We finished the store debt in November. Mr. Harrow signed the paper. He says the deed must remain until the wool company closes its winter account. Elena does not trust this. I will ask again after shearing. Elsie read the lines twice. The county record claimed Mateo and Elena had surrendered their 42 acres in October, a month before the debt was paid, a month before Silas signed the receipt. The dates could not both be true. Lena removed another letter. In this one, Mateo wrote that the family had been ordered off the property after refusing to sign a new account. He did not say they sold the land. He did not say they abandoned it. He said the store would not return the deed. Elsie carried the letters inside and placed them beside the H-17 tag. For the first time, the separate pieces formed one line. The brass code identified the account. The paid slip proved the debt ended. The letter showed the deed remained in Harrow mercantile custody. The tax record converted that custody into a voluntary transfer. It was not enough to restore the land, but it was enough to show the official story was false. By morning, Lena had brought 2 more boxes from her grandmother's attic. Elsie reopened the payroll records while Lena sorted names by family, not spelling. That changed everything. The ledgers had scattered workers under altered names, but the brass codes stayed consistent. Mateo Ortiz might appear as Matt Ortez or M. Ortiz, but H17 never changed. The letter identified H as the North Housing Row. The number marked the family account. The cuts along each tag's edge identified where the family worked. Square notches for the wash station, curved cuts for shearing crews, a hole near the top for freight loading. The tags were not payment. They were portable identities. A worker carried one from the pond to the store, from the store to the payroll table, and from the payroll table to the land account. Whoever controlled the tags controlled the connection between a person's labor, debt, and property. Elsie spread the tags across the library table. K3 connected to Petr Kovac. M21 connected to Rosa Marin. Both names appeared on the paid slips recovered from the collapsed bank. Both families vanished from county tax rolls within weeks. Lena watched Elsie write the matches on brown paper. "How many?" she asked. 3 confirmed. "And the others?" "Possibly. That is not the same as proof." "No." Elsie looked at her. "But it is the first time the records have agreed with your family." They took the material to Mara Keene's office before noon. Mara was Bracken County's legal counsel, 43 years old, precise in speech, and known for reading every attachment before signing anything. Caleb Voss sat across from her with the bypass schedule open on his tablet. Elsie expected resistance. Instead, Mara separated every item into a different folder. Original letter, paid receipt, tax record, payroll page, physical tag, chain of custody, she asked. Elsie explained where each paper and tag had been found. Lena confirmed the letters had remained with her grandmother's family. Caleb leaned forward. "These materials do not prove the pond contains anything else." "No," Mara said. "They do not invalidate the road easement." "No." "Then the schedule stands." Mara placed Mateo's letter beside the tax transfer. The dates conflict. Old records conflict all the time. The conflict benefits the same property holder whose initials appear on the paid receipt. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Are you accusing the Harrow family?" "I am identifying a legal risk." Mara prepared a temporary preservation notice. For 48 hours, no excavation, filling, pumping, or removal could occur within 50 feet of the washing ledge. The order was narrow. It did not cancel the bypass. It did not recognize any ownership claim, but it stopped the machines. That afternoon, the Orange survey crew packed its equipment. No one laughed. Wade arrived at the pond as the last truck left. "You froze the project over 3 families," he said. "I froze it over records that do not agree. You know what happens if more of them match?" Elsie did. The county would face claims. The Harrow family would face worse. Wade looked toward Lena. "People will lose work because of this. People already lost land. And you think losing ours makes it clean?" Before Elsie could answer, Lena called from the ledge. Another tag had surfaced where the bank collapsed. It was the 58th they had recovered. Mara, who had driven out to photograph the site, took it from Lena's hand. The tag was narrow, with 1 round hole and 3 shallow cuts. Its code read K58. Mara stopped breathing for a moment. On the back, nearly hidden beneath the blackened patina, someone had scratched a surname. Keene, not her married name, her grandmother's. Mara Keene did not return to the county office that evening. She drove instead to the small white house where her grandmother had lived until her death. The property belonged to Mara's aunt now, but the attic remained almost untouched. In a cedar trunk beneath old quilts, Mara found a photograph of a family standing beside a low stone house. 5 adults, 3 children. A windmill in the background. On the back, someone had written, "Keene Place, North Pasture." Before the road took it, Mara had heard the story differently. Her grandmother said the family lost the property because they could not pay their store account. She spoke of it as a shameful failure, something caused by poverty and bad judgment. But the account sheet Mara found in the county archive showed a 0 balance. Paid in full. The land transfer was recorded 11 days later. Mara sat alone beneath the attic light with K58 inches her hand. For the first time, she understood why her grandmother apologized whenever they passed the Harrow pasture. She had not been ashamed of losing the land. She had been taught to believe the loss was her fault. The next morning, Mara entered the library basement carrying 3 sealed archive boxes. "I am not here as county counsel," she said. Caleb had removed her from the bypass review after she disclosed her family connection. Another lawyer would represent the county at the emergency hearing. Mara placed the boxes beside Elsie's brown paper chart. "I am here because my grandmother's name is in these records." For the next 30 hours, Mara, Elsie, and Lena worked through every surviving payroll page, store account, tax transfer, and handwritten index. They stopped relying on surname spelling. They followed the codes. H identified the North Housing Row. K marked families assigned to freight and loading. M referred to the southern labor cabins near the shearing sheds. The numbers followed household accounts, not individual workers. One family might appear under 4 different names in the ledgers, but its code remained unchanged across payroll, store debt, work assignments, and property notes. By late afternoon, they had confirmed 27 families. By midnight, 41. At dawn, Mara found the final pattern. A narrow column in an old freight book listed brass markers returned at the end of each season. 58 codes had been marked unreturned during the winter of 1931. Not lost. Unreturned. Each of those codes belonged to a family whose land disappeared from the tax rolls within the following 6 months. Elsie wrote the final number at the top of the chart. Wushaba. No one spoke. The scale of it changed the room. This was no longer a dispute over one 42-acre parcel. It was not one clerk's error or one family's grievance. 58 households had completed labor, paid accounts, or remained active after county records claimed they had voluntarily surrendered their property. The emergency hearing began at 10 that morning. The courthouse room was filled beyond capacity. Ranchers stood in the hallway. Reporters from 2 neighboring counties lined the back wall. Caleb Voss sat beside the county's replacement attorney. Wade remained alone in the second row. Mara was called first. She explained the conflict without dramatizing it. The brass codes matched multiple independent records. Paid accounts appeared before alleged voluntary transfers. Families listed as departed continued receiving work assignments afterward. The county attorney objected. "These are interpretations of incomplete records." Mara nodded. "They are interpretations supported by recurring codes across 4 separate record systems. Do you possess original deeds proving unlawful retention?" "No." "Then you cannot establish ownership." "No." A murmur moved through the room. The attorney turned toward the judge. "This hearing concerns a road easement, not a historical theory." Lena stood when her name was called. She read Mateo Ortiz's letter aloud. Mr. Harrow signed the paper. "He says the deed must remain until the wool company closes its winter account." Then Elsie placed the H-17 tag, the paid receipt, the tax transfer, and the payroll sheet on the evidence table. 4 items, 1 family, 4 versions of the same event. Only one version required Mateo and Elena Ortiz to surrender land after their debt had already been paid. The judge asked the county attorney whether any independent review had been performed. None had. He asked Caleb whether the road could be delayed. Caleb answered honestly, "Yes, but not without cost." "How much?" "Potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars." The judge looked toward Elsie. "And what is the cost of proceeding?" Elsie did not look at Wade. "Whatever is still under that stone." The preservation order was extended for 14 days. All work within the pond parcel stopped. The room fell silent before the judge finished reading the ruling. No one apologized. No one applauded. But the same people who had once treated Elsie's purchase as a joke now watched the evidence table as if it might contain something dangerous. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Lena and Mara. For a few minutes, it appeared they had won. Then Daniel Pike approached Elsie near the side steps. "You still have no deeds," he said. "We have proof the records were changed. You have proof the records disagree." He was right. The tags identified families. The receipts proved payments. The letters established custody. But without the original deeds or a ledger showing who ordered them retained, the county could argue clerical failure instead of deliberate theft. Elsie returned to the library after dark. She unfolded the 3 paid slips from the pond and examined Silas's initials beneath a magnifying lamp. On the back of Mateo Ortiz's receipt, beneath a stain she had assumed was mud, faint pencil marks crossed the paper. She held it sideways to the light. 5 words emerged in Silas's hand. Under the wash ledge, not the store. Elsie read them aloud. Lena looked toward the basement window, beyond which the road to the pond had disappeared into darkness. Mara closed the archive box. If the original deeds still existed, Silas had not hidden them in Harrow Mercantile. He had put them beneath the place the county intended to destroy. The county did not challenge the 14-day preservation order directly. It changed the reason for entering the pond. 2 mornings after the hearing, Caleb Voss delivered an emergency safety report to Elsie's house. The collapsed bank, exposed stone, and standing water were now classified as a public hazard. According to the report, another heavy rain could send mud across Harrow Road or trap anyone working near the ledge. The county proposed a solution: drain the pond, stabilize the bank, remove loose stone. Nothing in the report used the word destroy. Everything in it would destroy the evidence. The judge said no excavation, Elsie said. Caleb stood on her porch with his hat in both hands. The order protects historical material. It does not require the county to ignore an immediate danger. You found that danger after the road was delayed. I found it after you collapsed part of the bank. His answer was not cruel. That made it harder to dismiss. Caleb had workers waiting, contracts expiring, and a road project losing money each day. He was not trying to erase 58 families because he hated them. He was choosing the problem he could see over the truth he could not yet prove. The county will begin stabilization within 48 hours, he said. Elsie looked past him toward the pond. What happens to the ledge? If it is unsafe, it comes out. By noon, Wade arrived with a folder from an attorney in Red Butte. He placed it on Elsie's kitchen table beside her unpaid bills. I signed my portion of the family easement, he said. You had no right to sign for my land. I signed for mine. The Harrow pasture had been divided on paper but never by fence. Wade still owned a minority interest inherited from his father. His signature allowed the county to claim that part of the family supported the road. Elsie opened the folder. Beneath the easement agreement was a petition requesting temporary financial guardianship. She looked up. Wade could not meet her eyes. You think I am incompetent. I think you spent medicine money on a pond, refused $20,000, stopped a county project, and are about to risk the only property either of us has left. You filed this before the hearing. I prepared it before the hearing. That is not better. Wade gripped the back of a chair. My store is gone. My house is mortgaged. If the county withdraws its offer, I lose the last thing my father left me. Elsie closed the folder. And if those deeds are real, then dead men did something wrong. Those families are still living with it. So are we. His voice broke on the final word. For the first time, Elsie saw that Wade's anger was not only greed. He was terrified that justice would arrive with nowhere to stop. Mara came after dark. She no longer carried a county briefcase. Caleb's replacement attorney had instructed her to surrender every bypass file and avoid contact with Elsie. If I continue, Mara said, the county may terminate my contract. Then don't continue for me. I'm not. Mara placed a copy of K-58 beside the photograph from her grandmother's attic. I spent 20 years believing my family lost that land because they failed. My grandmother died believing it too. She had filed an independent notice with the State Land Records Office and requested an outside review of the 1,931 transfers. The action could protect the evidence beyond the county's 14-day order. It could also end Mara's career in Bracken County. They will say I acted because of my family, she said. Did you? Yes. Mara did not apologize, but that does not make the records false. Together, they returned to the archive after midnight. Elsie searched the transfer books while Mara photographed every page. Lena worked through correspondence from the wool company's regional office. Near 2 in the morning, Elsie found a narrow ledger titled Voluntary Conveyances. 58 entries filled 6 pages. Each line named a family, a parcel, and the date the land moved into company or private ownership. The final column was labeled Witness. Elsie traced the names with one finger. The same initials appeared again and again. S.H. Not on 3 receipts, on 46 transfers. Silas Harrow had not simply known the deeds were being held. He had witnessed the documents that converted those deeds into surrendered land. Elsie felt the room tilt. She remembered Silas warming her shoes beside the stove. She remembered his hand over hers at the sheep pond. She remembered the certainty with which he corrected a crooked number in an account book. A man could be careful with numbers and careless with people. Lena stood across the table. Did he sign all of them? 46. And the others? Different witnesses. Mara examined the dates. Some signatures came before the final payments. Silas had certified voluntary transfers while the families were still working off their accounts. He had helped create the official story before the debts even ended. Elsie wanted to find another explanation. Perhaps he had been forced. Perhaps the company threatened him. Perhaps his later decision to hide the records proved remorse. But remorse did not erase participation. On the final page, beneath the last transfer, Silas had written a sentence in pencil. I kept what they ordered burned. Not I stopped them, not I returned it, only kept. At 3:40, Mara received a call from a state investigator. The county had filed an emergency request to enter the site at dawn. Elsie closed the ledger. They drove to the pond with the tin box, cameras, tarps, and copies of every preservation notice. Lena called descendants whose names they had confirmed. Mara contacted the state office again. Wade did not answer his phone. At 4:15, engines sounded beyond Harrow Road. The first bulldozer turned through the gate with its lights off. Elsie placed the ledger inside the tin box and stepped to the edge of the mud. This time, she was no longer standing there to protect Silas's secret. She was standing there to open it. The bulldozer stopped 20 yards from the washing ledge. Caleb Voss climbed down before the operator lowered the blade. Mara stood in the road with the state preservation notice raised above her head. Lena held her phone toward the crew, streaming everything to the descendants she had called during the night. Elsie looked at the 3 drainage grooves cut into the sandstone. Silas had written under the wash ledge, not beneath the pond. The hollow sound she had found earlier came from the narrow space where the grooves entered the bank. Give me 20 minutes, she said. Caleb checked the unstable slope. You have 10. Elsie slid the pry bar into the central seam. Lena braced the eastern edge while Mara cleared roots from the side channel. The stone did not lift. It moved sideways. A hidden iron pin released beneath the mud. The front section shifted less than an inch, but cold air escaped from the cavity behind it. Inside was no chest and no money. There was only a long oilcloth bundle fitted into the stone like a coffin for paper. Elsie pulled it free. The outer layer broke apart, but the waxed cloth beneath remained dry. Mara photographed every fold before touching it. Lena read the names as Elsie laid the contents across clean tarps. 58 paid debt slips. 58 copies of deeds. A wool company transfer book. A packet of letters tied with black thread. And one narrow ledger bearing Silas Harrow's name. The first letter came from the regional director of North Valley Wool. It instructed Harrow Mercantile to retain all deeds used as security, even after store accounts were satisfied. The company planned to consolidate the parcels for grazing access and a private freight route. The second letter ordered Silas to mark families as voluntary departures. The third told him to burn the account links after the transfers were recorded. Silas had not burned them, but he had obeyed everything before that. His private ledger showed why. For each transferred parcel, Harrow Mercantile received a fee. On some pages, Silas called it storage income. On others, document service. The language changed. The money did not. Elsie found the Ortiz land, the Kovac parcel, the Marin pasture, and the Keene water lot. Then she found Harrow Farm. Its northern field had once belonged to a family named Bellaso. The farmhouse where Elsie had lived since childhood stood on 12 acres taken from the same parcel after the Bellaso debt was paid. Silas had not merely helped a company take land from strangers. He had enlarged his own property with it. Lena watched her read. You didn't know. Elsie kept her eyes on the ledger. I knew enough to be afraid of looking. That was not guilt. It was not innocence either. The final letter was written by Silas years later. I told myself I was keeping families from winter eviction. Then I told myself the company would take the deeds with or without me. After that, I told myself the land would be safer in local hands. Every reason came after the money. I kept the papers because I could not return what I had helped take. I hid them because confession would have cost the girl her home. Elsie stopped reading. The girl was her. Silas had hidden the evidence to preserve the life he built for Elsie, even while knowing that life rested on another family's loss. He had known the right thing. He had simply chosen too late. Mara organized the documents into evidence bags. Caleb ordered the machinery shut down and called the county judge himself. No one needed to argue about whether the cavity contained historical material. The question had changed. It was now about what the documents would do to the living. The Ortiz descendants could reopen a claim to 42 acres. The Keene family could challenge the loss of its spring access. The Belasso heirs could claim the ground beneath Elsie's house. The county faced road delays, legal costs, and questions about every parcel created from the 1,931 transfers. Wade arrived after sunrise. He walked past the stopped bulldozer and saw the deeds spread across the tarps. Elsie handed him the Harrow ledger. He found their family name. Then, the Belasso entry. "If this becomes public," he said, "we lose everything." "Not everything. The house, the north field, my easement money." Elsie looked toward the washing ledge. "We lose what was never cleanly ours." Wade gripped the ledger. "You think giving it away fixes him?" "No." "Then what does it fix?" Elsie looked at Lena, Mara, and the rows of documents. "The part we are still doing." Daniel Pike arrived with an attorney before the state investigator. He offered a confidential settlement. The county would preserve copies, the Harrow family would retain possession, and the original documents would enter a private collection until ownership questions were resolved. Elsie could keep her home. Wade could keep his land interest. The descendants could receive money without years of litigation. There was one condition. The full ledger would remain sealed. Individual families might be compensated, but the system would never be publicly named. Silas would remain a complicated local merchant instead of a man who had helped convert debt into theft. Elsie took the settlement papers. Then she placed them beneath the Belasso deed and tore them in half. "All of it goes on the public record," she said, "including my house." Mara began transmitting the first scanned pages to the state archive. By mid-morning, the bulldozers were gone. The pond remained, but Elsie no longer owned the story hidden beneath it. By afternoon, 58 families would learn that the land they had been taught to mourn as a failure had been taken from them by design. What happened next would decide whether the truth became another document in a box or the beginning of restitution. By noon, the documents from beneath the washing ledge had reached every newsroom in the state. The headlines came first. 58 families. Missing deeds. Bracken County land scheme. But inside the courthouse, the work began without cameras. Mara Keene entered the county commission room carrying 2 letters. One disclosed that her grandmother's family appeared among the claims. The other ended her contract as county counsel. The commissioners asked her to remain until replacement counsel arrived. Mara refused. "As long as I represent the county," she said, "every step I take can be dismissed as self-interest or concealed as attorney work." She placed both letters on the table. "I will not help the county defend these transfers. I will also not pretend my family connection makes the documents less real." Leaving cost her the largest client of her career. It meant losing health coverage, staff support, and the office where she had practiced for 11 years. She left anyway. That afternoon, she filed an independent petition requesting state custody of the original deeds until every claim could be reviewed. She named her own family in the disclosure and asked that K-58 receive no priority over the other 57 codes. It was not an apology, it was a surrender of power. Caleb Voss arrived at the pond with revised engineering maps. He did not bring reporters. The original bypass cut directly across the washing ledge because that route was shorter, flatter, and cheaper. His new plan shifted the road east, crossed a rocky rise, and required an additional drainage bridge. The change would cost the county nearly $400,000. It would also preserve the pond and every parcel under active review. Caleb spread the map across the hood of his truck. "I should have ordered a historical survey when you first asked about the ledge," he told Elsie. "Yes. I thought the delay was the danger. It was the danger you could measure." He nodded. The revised route put his position at risk. Contractors would demand compensation. Commissioners would accuse him of losing control of the project. Yet he signed the change order before leaving. Then he gave Mara the original survey notes, showing that the stone ledge had been deliberately omitted from the final construction map. He did not know who removed it. He knew the omission could no longer remain hidden. Wade stayed away for 2 days. On the 3rd morning, Lena found him sitting alone inside the abandoned Harrow Mercantile. The shelves were bare. The account counter still bore grooves left by coins, knives, and years of elbows. Wade had the family easement agreement open in front of him. My father believed this store kept the valley alive, he said. Lena remained near the door. Maybe it did for some people. He worked here from the time he was 12. My grandmother worked at the pond from the time she was 11. Wade looked at the transfer ledger. If I give up my claim, I lose the money that could save my house. Lena did not tell him what to do. She placed a copy of the Bellaso deed on the counter. Your family had choices when ours didn't. Then she left him alone. Wade remained there until dark. The next morning, he went to the county clerk and withdrew his signature from the bypass easement. He also filed a notice refusing any distribution from disputed Harrow parcels until ownership was resolved. The act did not make him poor that day, but it ended the sale he had depended on. He came to Elsie's house afterward carrying the guardianship petition. Without speaking, he tore it into 4 pieces and dropped them into the stove. I still think this may ruin us, he said. It might. I'm not ready to forgive him. Neither am I. Wade looked toward the north field. What happens to the house? We let the people who should have had a choice finally make one. That same week, the county prepared a revised offer for Elsie. The amount remained $1.2 million. The language changed. Instead of purchasing the entire disputed area, the county proposed compensating her for access delays, survey costs, and loss of development value. Legally, she could have accepted it. The money was tied to the road, not directly to the stolen deeds. Mara explained that accepting would not necessarily invalidate the claims. Elsie read the offer at the kitchen table where Silas once balanced store accounts. Then she carried it to the first public meeting of the descendants. The gathering took place inside an unused livestock barn because no county room was large enough. Families came from 3 states. Some brought letters. Others brought photographs, tax receipts, or stories passed down without documents. Many wanted immediate restitution. Some wanted cash. Some wanted land returned parcel by parcel. Others feared reopening boundaries that had changed for nearly a century. Elsie stood only after everyone else had spoken. The county offered me $1.2 million, she said. The barn grew quiet. I am refusing it. She placed the document on the table. I am asking that the same amount be placed into an independent legal and survey fund for all 58 families. Not the Harrows, not the Keens, all of them. A commissioner objected from the back. Elsie turned toward him. The road created the money. The hidden deeds created the need. The county did not agree immediately, but Caleb's revised route could not proceed without resolving access, and public pressure made a private settlement impossible. By the end of the meeting, the commissioners approved an initial fund large enough to begin title research, boundary surveys, and family tracing. It was less than $1.2 million. It was also the first public money ever directed toward undoing the transfers. Then the harder question arrived. What should happen to the land? Returning 58 parcels exactly as they existed in 1931 would divide farms, roads, wells, and homes, now occupied by people who had not caused the theft. Paying everyone cash would reduce the history to another transaction. Arguments filled the barn, until Lena stood beside the old parcel map. What if we stop asking which family gets which fence first? She said. She proposed a community land trust. Disputed acreage could be transferred gradually into shared ownership as claims were validated. Current residents could receive lifetime occupancy agreements. Agricultural land could remain in use. Water rights, grazing access, and lease income could benefit the descendant families collectively. No one applauded. The idea was too large for applause, but people began asking questions. Mara wrote them down. Wade studied the Northfield boundary. Caleb offered the county survey team. Elsie placed the Bellaso deed at the center of the table. For the first time, the documents were no longer only evidence of what had been taken. They had become instructions for what the living might return. And before the meeting ended, the representatives of all 58 families agreed to begin drafting the trust. 9 months after the washing ledge was opened, the new bypass curved east of Harrow Road. Drivers passing through Bracken County could see the old sheep pond for only a few seconds between the rocky rise and the cottonwoods. There was no large sign beside it. No monument announced what had happened there. The land did not need another official version of its history. It needed time. 31 of the 58 family claims had been verified through deeds, payroll records, letters, and tax transfers. 12 more remained under legal review. Others were complicated by marriages, name changes, or descendants who had scattered across several states. The community land trust began with the parcels no one disputed. A former grazing field became shared pasture again. Lease income from 2 commercial lots funded title research for families still waiting. The keen water access was restored, allowing 3 farms to use the spring that had once been separated from their property. The work was slow. Some families chose money instead of land. Some wanted nothing connected to Bracken County. A few argued that no modern agreement could repair what their grandparents had lost. No one told them they were wrong. Restitution did not erase the years. It only returned the right to choose. The Belliso claim included the northern harrow field, the farmhouse, and the small orchard behind Elsie's kitchen. When the title review confirmed the boundary, Elsie signed the transfer papers without requesting an exception. Wade sat beside her at the trust office. "You could fight the house," he said. "I could. You have lived there longer than any Belliso ever did. That doesn't change how we received it." Her signature moved the property into the trust. For 11 days, Elsie did not know where she would live. She began packing books into produce boxes. She gave Wade Silas's cracked watch but kept the dented tin box. She arranged to rent a room above the old feed store once the heating system was repaired. Then Lena arrived with Anna Belliso, the granddaughter of the youngest child named in the original deed. Anna was 81 and walked with 2 canes. Her father had spent his life telling people that the family's house still stood somewhere north of the sheep road. Anna entered Elsie's kitchen and rested her hand on the table. "My father remembered this window," she said. Elsie waited for her to ask for the keys. Instead, Anna placed a lifetime occupancy agreement on the table. The house would remain trust property. Elsie could live there until she died, provided no portion was sold or transferred back to the Harrow family. "This is not forgiveness for your grandfather," Anna said. "I understand. And it is not charity. I understand that too." Anna looked around the kitchen her father had remembered as a child. "It is a choice. My family should have had one before." Elsie signed. The brass tags were returned during the following months. Not in a ceremony, one family at a time. Mara kept K-58 only long enough to photograph both sides and attach the image to the public archive. Then she gave the original to her aunt, who placed it beside their grandmother's photograph. Lena received H-17 inches the abandoned Harrow Mercantile. She held it for a long time before slipping it into the grocery sack Teresa Ortiz had once carried into the library. Some descendants framed their tags. Some stored them with deeds and letters. One family buried theirs beneath a new fence post on restored land. Another passed it among 5 siblings before deciding that none of them should own it alone. Digital copies were placed in an open archive with every verified account, letter, and boundary map. No family had to ask permission from the Harrows, the county, or a private collector to see its own history again. Daniel Pike disappeared from the meetings after the state began investigating several boxes in his private collection. He had purchased records from closed estates for years. Some contained missing account pages from North Valley wool. The investigation remained open. Not every truth arrived in time for a clean ending. Mara opened a small legal office across from the courthouse. She specialized in disputed rural titles and historical land transfers. Above her desk hung no diploma from the county, only a copy of K-58. Caleb completed the bypass without losing where the project finished 5 months late. He added mandatory historical site reviews to future county surveys. Wade found work repairing irrigation pumps. On Fridays, he helped replace fencing around trust pasture. He still could not speak about Silas without anger, but he no longer defended him. Elsie and Lena rebuilt the archive together. They trained volunteers to search under misspelled names, work codes, family relationships, and handwritten land descriptions. Young people who had never heard of the washing station learned how a brass notch could connect a person to a debt, a wage, and a piece of ground. The pond itself changed very little. Cattails returned along the western bank. Rain filled the channels in spring. Sheep no longer passed through the water, but the grooves in the ledge remained visible. On the first warm morning of April, Elsie carried the last unreturned tag to the pond. It belonged to Rosa Marin's family. A great-grandson had driven from Colorado to receive it. He stood beside Elsie while water moved quietly across the stone. She placed M21 inches his palm. For months, she had been the keeper of the tags, the deeds, and Silas's confession. Now her hands were empty. The man thanked her. Elsie shook her head. "Your family kept it," she said. They just needed someone to find where it was waiting. After he left, Elsie sat on the washing ledge. No brass remained beneath it. No paper waited in the dark. The stone no longer protected a secret. It only guided the water. The pond had never kept treasure. It had kept track of who the land remembered.